Chris, welcome back, mate. How you doing?
Doing really well, Paul. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be back. First video in a while, but really happy to be back on the channel.
Yeah, we're obviously here to talk about Alistair Johnston and the links with a move to Celtic. I didn't think that the next time you were on, it would be because Celtic are possibly signing someone from Canada, mate, and to be honest with you. But he is a right back, and the speculation surrounding Juranovic has grown in recent weeks as well. So, again, still speculation at this point, but it does look like there's some sort of verbal agreement between the clubs, and the deal is picking up pace. So, 24 years old, right back. I think most of us probably caught a wee glimpse of him against Belgium the other night, but tell us what you know about him.
Yeah, so like you say, he's played in the MLS for a couple of seasons now, and I know a lot of people have been looking at some comments online. People are knocking the quality of Major League Soccer, but honestly, the growth in the game over here since 1994, when the World Cup was in America, and the next World Cup is shared between America, Mexico, and Canada. The growth in Major League Soccer and the game within Canada itself has been exponential, and Alistair Johnston is one of those players that's really benefited from a significant investment in the Canada, men's soccer program and his time with Montreal in the MLS. He's 24 years old, and again, just really speaks to Celtic's transfer policy since Ange Postecoglou takes over. Just the type of player that we're going to sign. And I know it's speculation, so that's what I'll quantify and clarify everything I'm going to say. It's purely speculation at this point, but certainly the rumors of him being strongly linked with the club are excellent, because we believe that Juranovic may also be on the way out, which is equal speculation. But Johnston's a very quick player, similar to Juranovic in that respect. He's very quick over the first 10, 15 yards, reads the game really well. He's also, and this is typical of the type of player that Ange has been looking at since he came in, he's very versatile. So if you watch the Belgium game, he actually was out on the wing for large portions of the game and marking one of the best players in the world in Kevin De Bruyne, and did a fantastic job within that 90 minutes. And look, this always happens in World Cups. This isn't unique to Johnston per se, but players have fantastic World Cups and they end up getting big moves. But to be honest, the links were out there before the first ball was actually even kicked, if you look through some of the rumor mills with Johnston being linked. Last season in the MLS, he had 4 goals and 4 assists. Like I say, he reads the game really well. So the high press wouldn't be anything I think that he would struggle with. If you look at his fitness and his record, he started 32 of 35 games last year. So, he's been very fit and available. And Montreal went deep into the playoffs in the MLS last year. So he certainly got, good fitness and good longevity from that perspective. He's shorter. He's 5'9", but obviously doesn't traditionally play in the center back role. But he has also played in there as well for Montreal at times when they've had injury. So very versatile player, which, as I mentioned, really speaks to what Ange has kind of been looking for. I think, areas of growth for him, obviously still a young player, but final ball, I think, would be probably something for him. But he has chipped in, like I say, 4 goals last year is a pretty decent return from a right back. And honestly, I would strongly recommend every Celtic fan watch the game tomorrow when Canada plays Croatia, because you're going to see Juranovic and Johnston play in the same game, which is kind of, as fate would have it, a very interesting coincidence.
Aye, absolutely. Current right back against the potential future right back. It's interesting that you talk about his final ball. If we're to take this as that Johnston's going to be a direct replacement for Juranovic, I think that's one of the big weaknesses in Juranovic's game, actually. I think he's really quick, and I don't know Johnston very well. From the clips I've seen of him, I think, going by the naked eye, Juranovic is maybe slightly quicker. And we know that Juranovic's recovery runs and his defending are really good. But I think at times, watching him over the course of a year now for Celtic, that is the one weakness. He's an excellent player, but the one weakness is when he gets in crossing positions. I think his end product could be a lot better. So I was thinking, just looking at the numbers, and I know it's a different standard, and you can never really compare cross continents, really. but 4 goals and 4 assists in a calendar year for a right back is a good output. So I was thinking, is that maybe one that he's got on Juranovic in terms of his creativity being better?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, obviously, I don't watch every Montreal game. I live closer to Toronto, so, but you know, in the times that he's played, yeah, I mean, his final ball at times can be very good, but I still think that that's an area for his game where he can grow. But I think his all-around play would be first and foremost a huge benefit to the Celtic squad if indeed he signs and if indeed Juranovic goes the other way. And it sounds like there's a fee being sort of thrown around of potentially 5-6 million, which is a significant output for a 24-year-old player, if that's what it ends up being. I mean, if that's in dollars, if it's $5 million, that's about £3.5 million. I'm not sure on what exactly if it's pounds or dollars, but I've seen that 5 million tag being thrown around. Now, if Juranovic goes, I suspect that could be for fairly significant money, just given that he is a starter for the Croatian national team. He has been an excellent player for Celtic. But it's interesting. I think Juranovic's game has dropped off a little bit from last year. I don't think he's quite been at the level. And I would say of the 2 right backs at the club right now, Ralston has the best final ball, in my opinion, at times over Juranovic. But to your point, Juranovic's power of recovery and you know his ability to get up and down the park are pretty unmatched in the Scottish game in terms of a right back. But Johnston would be an excellent complement if we were indeed to sign him. Like I say, reads the game incredibly well, and he comes inside a lot, which will be really to Ange's liking, which is why I suspect we are linked with him, because we do have that inverted fullback role where we have a lot of rotation from our fullbacks as part of our midfield and our attacking formation. So he really would blend very nicely with the way that we play.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about the fee as well. That seems like a lot, but again, if it's in dollars, then maybe £3.5 million is kind of the ballpark you'd expect Celtic to spend. I think it does fit in line with the recruitment of Ange as well, because it is an untapped market. It's a player that you'd look at, and a lot of Celtic supporters probably wouldn't have seen very much of him, if anything at all, aside from this World Cup, obviously, because now everybody's eyes are on him. But that is in line with like the recruitment from Japan and markets that we haven't really seen Celtic explore before, and certainly not have success in.
No, but I think if there are any Celtic fans out there, and I've seen a few comments about where he's potentially being signed from and what his level of experience is, he has 32 caps for Canada at 24 years of age. If he stays healthy, he'll have 100 caps for his country. Canada finished top of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying and just ran Belgium all over the park for huge parts of that game. Now, obviously, he's one player of 11. I appreciate that, but he had an excellent game. He is very composed. And for any Celtic fans, like I was just about to say, who doubt, other than, one player, because he's been injured significantly out of our Japanese signings. Tell me one other Celtic player that Ange has signed that has not made a meaningful to significant contribution in our success and our growth in the last 18 months as a team. Right? I don't think you could really argue with the signings that Ange has made. And clearly his guidance to the scouts and to the recruitment overall are being listened to and they're being met. And I'm not going to doubt anyone that we're linked with, that's a concrete link, because all of those signings have been, like I say, either a meaningful to a significant contribution. And that just speaks to our recruitment and how proactive we are. Like, we've already got one deal over the line, and there's probably this deal is also going to get done because he's out of season now. Right, so after the World Cup, MLS is off now until April. So he's obviously minus a little rest. He would be a great addition if it indeed turns out to be that way.
I did see those quotes from him. I think it might have been yesterday, and he was saying his phone was blowing up with the Celtic link. So how much he read into that, I don't know. But he certainly didn't seem turned off at the prospect, that's for sure. Just in terms of the price and talking about seeing him at the World Cup and the link starting before the first game against Belgium, it could work, I suppose, if he has an absolutely excellent next two games. It could drive the price up, really, for Celtic. But I read that he was also linked with Bologna. And it was news to me that, is it the Saputo family that own Montreal? They also own Bologna. So that seems credible. And again, if he does excel in the next two games, might there be interest for elsewhere that makes this more difficult to get over the line for Celtic? Again, we don't know where it's at. It might already be done and we don't know, but you can only speculate.
I mean, because we're having fun speculating, let's just speculate a little more, Paul. Just looking at his body language and the way he was talking, I feel like the deal is probably done. Just the way he had it was like, I can only describe it as like a glow of, I'm going to a huge club, the way he talked about the fan base, and just I'm cautiously optimistic that, you know, at least a verbal agreement is in place between the two clubs, and probably hard to negotiate personal terms whilst he's over in Qatar. So, and then obviously he'd have to complete a medical post World Cup. But I mean, yeah, just body language alone. And yes, you are right. The owners in Montreal also have an ownership with Bologna, but I don't think there's the same traction in the news and in the media about a potential deal there. So, like I say, I'm cautiously optimistic, and just because we're having fun speculating, I think the deal might be done. And just, you know, if he continues to excel, you know, for Canada in the World Cup in his next two games, it really could be another shrewd piece of business by Ange and the recruitment staff.
In terms of the recruitment and how well it seems that Celtic have planned since Ange arrived, obviously Kobayashi was confirmed this week as well, and we'll talk about him in a minute, but it does seem that the club's recruitment is a lot better planned these days. And if Johnston is earmarked and a deal is almost there to be a replacement for Juranovic, that continues that theme. And that's something that the club over years going back haven't done well enough. But there has been a real change in the way they do business since Ange come in. And I know they've made changes to the recruitment side of things as well. But that sort of planning is exactly what a club that relies on a player trading model has to do.
Yeah, look, we're a massive club with a massive fan base, but the reality is we are bound by financial responsibility, and that player trading model is the one that balances that financial responsibility. But the biggest thing, the fundamental shift in our signing philosophy post Neil Lennon and even Brendan Rodgers era is build from a position of strength, right? That's what Rangers did not do after they won the league. And Ange came in, completely overhauled the team, and then had already essentially earmarked the four players. And he said it in an interview after the fact that he knew he was signing Maeda, Hatate, long before the deals were announced. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing. And that's building from a position of strength. Like, Hatate is going to go on, I believe. I hope he stays at Celtic for a number of years, but I can see him going on to play for a much bigger club. And that's part of that player trading model that you're referring to, Paul. But even now, Ange said in an interview, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, yep, we've already got our plans well in place for what we're doing. And like, we're at the end of November, and if this deal does go through, that's two deals done already before the World Cup is over, before the players have come back, and well before the deadline actually comes and goes. It really is. I have to give, and we had a lot of things as supporters that really, irked us during the 10 in a row season, right? There was lots of things. we weren't good enough. That's the bottom line. I can admit that. But what's really impressed me is, and seems to be since Nicholson took over, that they've just let Ange run that side of the club. He identifies the type of player. The recruitment staff go out and say, okay, we believe these players meet your needs and meet the style that you're looking for whatever position or multiple positions that this player can play. And he says, okay, let's get that deal done. Let's get it in place and let's get it done early. And that really does, that speaks to the building from a position of strength. And it's a 180-degree turn in our philosophy in terms of how the club is going about doing its business.
Yeah, it's really encouraging, and long may it continue. You mentioned the other deal that is over the line, that is confirmed. Yuki Kobayashi, 22-year-old left-sided centre-half from Vissel Kobe. It's the same team, obviously, that Kyogo Furuhashi joined from. A great age, looks a promising prospect. A left-sided centre-half is hard to come by, as we know from years of watching Celtic. He's also able to join the squad for training on the 1st of December. So that's Thursday coming, actually. I think the squad will be in Portugal. He'll be able to be there and train, but obviously can't play until he's officially registered in January. But would you make of that signing?
I mean, obviously, you know, I live on way over the other side of the world, living here in Canada, you're in Scotland, and he's just coming from, you know, Japan. But again, 22 years old, like you said, left-sided centre back. He's 6 feet. In the highlights that I've watched online, doesn't seem to get beat in the air very often. Obviously, you know, you're going to go up against some very physical centre forwards for some of the, you know, the smaller clubs in Scotland, and that's how the long ball can sometimes be the way that they try to get at us, or from set pieces where at times we've still been a little bit vulnerable. But certainly, again, from what I've saw online, reads the game well, is quite aggressive in terms of how he presses. Doesn't look to be slow over the first 5, 10, 15 yards either. And honestly, we don't have any insight, but the man at the helm of the club does, knows exactly who he's signing. And this is not by chance. Like, this is all part of Ange's plan. Now, the broader question is, what does it mean for Moritz Jens, who we signed on loan, and rumor was part of that deal is we had an option to buy.
Yeah.
And then obviously with Stephen Welsh, what does it mean in terms of the long-term pecking order of centre backs at the club? But a 5-year deal at 22 years old, very shrewd piece of business.
Yeah, I mean, that's the club have had a few 5-year deals recently, and it does speak to a commitment and the ability of these players, and also again helps with that model, because if you have 4 years, you can end up in a sticky situation with 18 months to go. So I think that extra year is always handy for the club. In terms of centre half, Stephen Welsh has sort of dropped off in terms of the pecking order, I think, in the first half of this season. And we did reject bids for him in the summer. There's been interest in Stephen Welsh, and the club decided to keep him. Moritz Jens as well, I think, who impressed everyone to begin with. I think the jury's still out on him a little bit, to be honest. I think Starfelt and Carter Vickers are obviously the strongest pairing. So if Kobayashi can come in and impress, we do have good numbers for at least for the next 6 months, unless anyone goes out in January. We've got good cover in that position. It's just about determining the quality and then making a long-term decision. And the likes of Jens, the likes of Welsh, and that might be in the summer that those guys either move on or stay with us. But you would think that one of them is going out.
Yeah, and it's possible Stephen Welsh could go out on loan, you know, as part of the January window business if he feels like he wants to get time. But I'm not sure if that would be the case. If Celtic declined a couple of offers for him, it's hard to see that they would shift away from that position, you know, in only the space of 3 or 4 months. But I don't doubt for 1 second. My opinion has always been, when they're fully fit, Carter Vickers and Starfelt are, for now, would be the first two names on the team sheet, Paul. But I think you're not signing a 22-year-old on a 5-year deal if you don't have plans for him to be part of your first team, squad at a minimum, right? At a minimum. But clearly Ange has seen enough in his time, and going back, you're probably talking he would have been 18 or 19, I would have imagined, when he broke into the J League. And Ange is clearly very familiar with the type of player. And I do believe that was the one component we were missing, which was more of a left-sided centre back to complement the existing, two that traditionally play in there, being Starfelt and Carter Vickers. So again, and I'm just going to say this as well. I can't remember a squad like this in my entire life as a Celtic supporter. And really no grumblings about, I'm not getting playing time, etc., etc. The one player that did that got shown the door. Chris Jullien, thanks for your time, appreciate it, but you're surplus to requirements. And a lot of Celtic fans were a huge fan of Chris Jullien, and I was one of them. But if you're not in the manager's plans and you're not happy to fight for your spot and go by the intensive training and putting yourself into consideration by putting your head down and working hard, then you're not part of the ethos that the manager demands.
Yeah, and I think he's relied on that depth, particularly towards the final group of games there before the break for the World Cup, because he was making 5 and 6 changes, 4, 3. There was always multiple changes game to game. And obviously we looked a bit tired towards the end. There was a few narrow victories in the league, but we got through and we've got a really commanding lead and domestically now. But I think that does point to the squad that the manager's built. There generally is just about 2 players for every position, and he is managing them well enough. I know a lot of people think that Giakoumakis will be really frustrated because he's maybe not had enough starts in the first half of the season, but I don't think there's any real signs of unrest from anyone. I think everyone so far this season has been committed, and they accept that the manager's going to rotate the squad given the number of games that we're going through. You obviously haven't been on since the season started, so before I let you go today, give us a brief summary so far.
I mean, I think that batch of 13 games that we just had to end the season, which had, I believe, we only had 6 games at Celtic Park across all competitions. A few very narrow victories, but the hallmark of champions is if you can still win games by rotating your squad or, quote unquote, grinding out results. We had obviously had a couple of late winners in those batch of games. I mean, the St. Johnston game is a prime example, 95th minute. And, a couple of other narrow wins. But that's just, it's the we never stop attitude. And I think that's where Ange, as a manager, philosophically wants to see growth in his team year over year, right? So first season he comes in, huge overhaul. We turned the corner when we beat Rangers 3-0. I then truly felt that we could go on and win the league. And then winning at Ibrox 2-1 sealed the deal. We come into this season, we started really well. We went through a bit of a patch where we weren't playing well, but again, still winning games. And then we lose to St. Mirren in what was our worst performance of the year. But then we won every single league game following that. That's remarkable, right? And that when you're not dropping points, and then the performances began to pick up again, it really was, it is progression in year 2. And the Champions League, look, obviously it's a bit of a what if campaign, to be completely honest. Like, much like Canada, who didn't take their chances against Belgium. We just didn't take our chances in the big moments when we had them. We should have beat Shakhtar away from home. We probably could have took something a little more from Leipzig, but they're a very good team. And obviously for 60 minutes, we competed with the champions of Europe. So there's a lot of positives, but I just love the way that Ange talks about what he sees and what he expects is that the players will learn from this. They'll be better prepared the next time. And then let's take more points when we get back into the Champions League. Let's actually win a game away from home. Let's actually take advantage of the home support in the home stadium. So lots to be really excited about, Paul. Obviously, we're going into a cup semi-final in the new year, defending the first trophy that we won under Ange. We're at a very strong position in the league. Obviously, our neighbours across the road have chosen to sack their manager, and I'm not really sure who's going to come in and take over there, but I don't really care. I'm just worried about what we're doing, and we're going in absolutely the right direction. And if Ange keeps going the way he's going to go down as one of the best managers we've ever had the fortune. A real diamond in the rough, and he deserves all the plaudits he's getting. And if that leads to a bigger move, one more move for him in a few years' time, I'd be delighted for him, because he gets us. He gets us as a club. He gets us as a fan base, and he gets the type of football that we love to watch. And it's I don't have a better time as a Celtic fan. Even when we won all the trebles, those were amazing. But the type of football we're playing is just, I'll tune in to watch any day, anytime.
Yeah. As long as a few years, you mean another 7 or 8, then I agree. That is about that growth, though, isn't it? And I think, I mean, I don't expect that this is the best version of an Ange Postecoglou Celtic a year and a half in. I think we can get better. I expect us to get better. This recruitment we've talked about here in this video is going to go some way towards that. But I do expect if we can secure qualification to the Champions League next season, the players will be in a better place mentally to deal with it, and physically as well, technically. I think you could never expect a team that have never played together, and even individually, most of them hadn't played at that level. You can't expect everything to come together, and that's probably the case. I know we've alluded to Canada a couple of times in this video because we're talking about Alistair Johnston, but it's the case for them as well, like the last World Cup in 1986. Mm-hmm. So the team doesn't have that sort of mindset of competing and winning games at a certain level, and you can't just click your fingers and make that happen. It is a process, and I trust that we'll get there with Ange.
Wholeheartedly agree, and that's the beauty of having him as a manager. Like, I bet you he already has a plan for what he wants to do in the summer, right? Who might move on? Who am I looking at to replace? Continue to build from a position of strength. We won't be naive going into the Champions League next year because we've got 6 games under our belt. And when you're out of a competition for 5 years, even though it's not the same group of players, it's just understanding being in those moments and learning from those moments and applying them in the future. That to me is where I actually have the most confidence in what Ange brings with his managerial experience and his style of play. And I have no problem going at it. I couldn't care less. I'd rather win a game 4-3. Like that game at Tynecastle. That's football. That's football at its absolute finest. Back and forth. And he said it before, I'd much rather win 4-3 than 1-0. Well, there you go. Exhibit A was that game at Tynecastle, which was another huge 3 points in that group of 13 games we had, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent, mate. Thank you. Let's hope we see Alistair Johnston in the hoops in the next 3 or 4 weeks. That's it. Like this video, comment your own thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you again for another video soon. Cheers.